So let's start the inaugural session, and I would like to invite our chief guest for today's Youth Summit, Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan Garu, IAS, founder Foundation for Democratic Reforms, onto the dais. I also invite Dr. Samaram onto the dais.
Good morning, everybody. We're honored to have Shri Jayaprakash Narayan, IAS, founder Foundation for Democratic Reforms here. Sir is a physician by training who went into the Indian Administrative Service in the aftermath of the emergency and the failure of the Janata experiment. He was a topper in the IAS exam. During his 16 years of distinguished public service in various capacities, he acquired a formidable reputation in the state of Andhra Pradesh. He has had significant milestones, such as creating permanent employment for 8,000 youth from displaced families of Visakhapatnam Steel Plant. He was instrumental in the creation of a record 2 lakh acres of irrigation, which is the largest such program with direct participation of people in Prakasam district. He strengthened the credit cooperatives and made them independent of the government control. In order to translate his vision into practical reality, he resigned from services, which is IAS, in 1996, and worked with like-minded colleagues for the formation of Loksatta. Loksatta has emerged as India's leading civil society initiative for governance reforms. Some of Loksatta's contributions have been the Monumental Right to Information Act 2005, National Rural Health Mission 2005, Gram Nyayalayas Act 2009, the Lokpal Act 2011, and many more. For his amazing service, he has been honored with many awards, such as the Rotary Manav Seva Award 2002, the Yudhvir Memorial Award 2002, the Dr. Rustam D. Ranji Rotary Award by the Rotary Club of India in 2003, the Dr. Pinnamaneni Sita Devi Foundation Award, and the Bharat Asmita Janajagran Shrestha in the area of public awakening. Through Foundation for Democratic Reforms, Loksatta movement and other fora has been actively pursuing reforms in service guarantees in government offices, education, healthcare, local government employment, judicial and police reforms, various anti-corruption measures and political reforms to transform governance, particularly at state and local levels. We request Jayaprakash Garu to come and share a few words.
అందరికీ నమస్కారం. చాలా టైం పెట్టారు. నేను మిమ్మల్ని ఉపన్యాసాలతో విసిగించకుండా కొద్ది నిమిషాలు కొన్ని భావాలు పంచుకున్న తర్వాత చర్చలాగా పెట్టుకుందాం, ప్రశ్నోత్తరాలు. యువత కూడా ఉన్నారు. Forgive me, those who are non-Telugu speaking, I'll try and switch over into English once in a while, but because most of the people here probably would not be comfortable with English, I would be speaking mostly in Telugu. 54 సంవత్సరాల క్రితం మొట్టమొదటిసారి నాస్తిక్ కేంద్రానికి వచ్చాను. అప్పుడు ఆ సైన్స్ సెంటర్ విజిట్ చేస్తే నియంత గారు మంచి కుర్రాడు, నాకు గుర్తున్నంత వరకు టక్ చేసుకున్నాడు. అప్పుడు మరి ఆ రోజులో టక్ చేసుకున్న రోజు నాకు తెలియదు. నాకు గుర్తుంది. అద్భుతంగా మాకు 14 ఏళ్ల వయసులో ఆ సైన్స్ ఎగ్జిబిట్స్ చూపెట్టారు. గ్రామంలో పెరిగిన నాకు మనలో చాలా మందిలాగా మరి వినాయక చవితి వస్తే వినాయక చవితి దేవుడి పూజ దగ్గర కూర్చోవటం, పుస్తకాలు ఏదో అక్కడ పెట్టడం, వినాయక చవితి ఆ కథ చదవటం అంత అలవాటుగా ఉండేది. ఏమిటో తెలియకుండా దేవుడు అనేది మనకి తెలిసి కాదు, అదొక సంప్రదాయంగా వచ్చేసింది. I'll try and use both because I'm also concerned about the others who might not follow English because language is a very big barrier. I reckon English is a natural language now for me, like for many of us, because though I grew up in Telugu, I think in English, I read in English, and when I speak in Telugu, I translate instantly into Telugu. So English is natural and easy, but ultimately we have to look at the audience and their concerns. Without knowing what it is, as a part of our Indian culture, about 99% of Indians are believers in God in some form or the other, whether Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Sikh, Jain, whatever be the faith. About 99% of Indians, probably India is the most God-fearing nation on earth. And the literature I read in a village, there was hardly any literature available. So I remember Panduranga Mahatyam, my aunt who raised me, she had that book. So all these great saints of the Bhakti movement of Panduranga. And then my grandmother used to have Brahmangari Charitra, Potuluri Virabrahmeswara Swami Charitra. Again, all these miracles and godmen and so on and so forth. That was the staple diet. At the age of 13, I came to Vijayawada to study in Loyola College, intermediate, in 1969. For the first time, my eyes opened up. I started reading Bertrand Russell. One of the first books I read was Why I Am Not a Christian. When I mentioned this publicly, many Christians were offended that I was actually challenging Christian faith in particular. No, nothing of the kind. Incidentally, I read that book. That's the title. Because Russell was born in a Christian family, therefore he took that as the starting point. Once he challenged the notion of God very logically and rationally, it occurred to me that perhaps many arguments in favor of God collapse in the face of reason. Because the most important argument is that who has created this all? When you look at the universe, your planet Earth, a very small, fragile, isolated, lonely, little planet somewhere in the far corners of the universe in the middle. When you look at that, it's very difficult to comprehend how it all came about. I remember my daughter at the age of 8, one day, because I used to introduce her to Cosmos of Carl Sagan and tell her a bit about astronomy and stuff like that. She said one day, Dad, if the universe is going to be a cold, lifeless one eventually, billions of years later, what's the point of it all? I was horrified. I was trying to introduce her to the idea of science and technology and the physical world and the universe and astronomy. My favorite subject is physics, and I'm very fond of astronomy, among other things. Whereas in the tiny mind, if it's going to be a cold, lifeless universe anyway, what's the point of it all? It's a very dangerous question and very unproductive question. So it took me a lot of effort to try and explain to her that, look, in the long term, in the very long term, obviously you are right. It's all going to disappear. No planet, no star will survive. While intellectually you have some idea of what it's about, you should not allow that to dictate your day-to-day purpose of life. We have to create an ambience, a myth in your mind that ultimately it's all about maybe a few generations. At the most you can think of a few generations and find a purpose in life. But as I said, at the age of 14 I came here. I still remember that wonderful instruction to science and how much of the superstition and stupidity disappears once you understand the causality. I'm delighted to have come back here. I came here several times in between, but today for the first time I spent a few hours, thanks to Dr. Samaram and Niyanta and other friends, when going around every single room, every single exhibit here, and then I was drinking in this whole atmosphere. It's an amazing combination of rationalism, logic and science, and modernity. 21st century ideas and technology are all exhibited here, unlike almost any university now. I'm amazed that at the age of 86, Dr. Samaram looks at artificial womb and additive manufacturing, what we call 3D printing, the space science and technologies, and so on and so forth. Robotics is incredible. My genuine tribute to a wonderful human being that at the age of 86, he is probably the youngest man here. Young in spirit, young in mind, and I dare say young in body too. I think he'll give a stiff competition to many of us in walk or in physical activity. And that's the way to live. A full, purposive, productive, meaningful life, as long as life is available to us. I will not take much of your time. I would like to focus on three broad ideas. We don't require to convert each other. The fact that we are sitting here means that we already are questioning much of the traditional received wisdom that is handed out to us. So we don't have to persuade each other. But we also have to look at certain issues. Like my daughter asked the question, if it's going to be a cold, lifeless universe eventually, what's the purpose of it all? So my first broad point is, at least from my perspective, it doesn't matter to me whether God is there or not. I used to fiercely argue as a young kid in Loyola College when my moral science teacher, Father Thekamari, obviously they would say that there is a God, and I used to challenge the notion of God. I no longer challenge that. I don't care. If your God is pantheistic, I have no problem. As long as your God does not encourage superstition, hatred, and violence, I'm not really bothered. I keep telling people that I'm an agnostic. Many people say an agnostic is a cowardly atheist. He doesn't dare to admit openly that he's an atheist, and therefore he claims to be agnostic. I probably belong to that category. But what matters is, even if there is no God, I believe there is a sin, not in the biblical sense, but a concept of evil, wrong, something fundamentally wrong. I truly believe that there are two great sins. The first great sin is unfulfilled potential. Every child, every baby, irrespective of the circumstances of birth, is endowed with enormous potential by nature. And if you believe in God, by God, it doesn't matter who endow that potential. But if human society is incapable of fulfilling that potential, nurturing that child, giving an opportunity to flower, to me that's a great sin, because humans, unlike any other species, require that nurturing. Every other species, we all know when a cow calves or when some other animal gives birth to a baby, within minutes, the baby will stand up and start walking or running. Only the human child requires years of nurturing. It's unique because of our evolutionary, biological, specific nature. I don't want to go into anatomical and physiological alterations that necessitated it, but we're unique. Though we are all like any other animal, any other living form, we are unique in the sense that only human species requires years of nurturing. And therefore, what nature endows is not enough unless society actually fulfills that potential. The second great sin to my mind is avoidable suffering. What cannot be avoided for want of knowledge or ability, there's nothing we can do except grieving. But what can be avoided and eliminated, if that suffering still continues, to me that's a great sin. If we judge our society by these two standards of unfulfilled potential and avoidable suffering, India, I dare say, is home to the largest sum total of sin on planet Earth. No other country suffers as much as India does from unfulfilled potential and avoidable suffering. I'm not one of those India bashers. I'm very proud of our country, our heritage, our culture, our civilization. I'm a great optimist. But a true optimist is not a romantic who has blinkers. A true optimist sees the reality as it is, imagines a better world, and paves the way for that. Therefore, these are the expressions of an optimist, a genuine optimist, not a pessimist or a person indulging in self-flagellation. Therefore, my appeal to all the rationalists, now let me switch over from atheism to rationalism. Fundamentally, we're all rationalists and humanists. We try and find a causal relationship, and we try and link our understanding and intellect to the betterment of humanity. So from that perspective, what I would like is, can we focus our energies on eliminating superstition, as this wonderful center has throughout its history done it and is continuing to do it, eliminate all forms of violence and hatred. And can we focus on eliminating these two great sins? Look at our school education. We are appallingly bad for a society which has thousands of years of culture and civilization, a culture of respect for learning. We are incredibly uneducated as a society today. I dare say we are even illiterate, not only uneducated, we are actually illiterate. A vast proportion of Indian kids, about 80 to 85%, know almost nothing after years of schooling. Almost nothing. Only about 15 to 20% of engineers can call themselves engineers, though even that is somewhat loose. 80% know practically nothing after engineering. Not because the kids are not bright. They are bright. But we created a monstrous, disgraceful educational edifice. If we don't set it right, there cannot be rationalism, there cannot be humanism, there cannot be economic growth, there cannot be progress. And we continue to be beset by these sins. And it's easy to set it right. Healthcare is a little better if you take the totality of the picture, because technology is helping us a great deal. But about 60 million people, 6 crore people, are descending into poverty every year. 6 crore people, almost the population of Britain. On the 1st of January in the year, they were not poor. By the end of the year, they are poor by our standard. 6 crore people per year on account of ill health or inadequate access to health care. How are we still coming out of poverty? Because the net flow is positive. Poverty line is not a stagnant one. People descend into poverty, people come out of poverty, and the margins are survival. And therefore, if 64 million people come out of poverty, 60 million people descend into poverty, there is a plus 4 million. Then imagine a world where healthcare is reasonably accessible to everybody. Therefore, this descent into poverty does not take place. Within a few years, without doing anything else, we can eliminate poverty from this land. It is that simple. We have all the factors in favor of it. In the two Telugu states, 45 lakh people are descending into poverty every year. 26 lakhs in Andhra Pradesh, 19 lakhs in Telangana. Every year, descending into poverty. This is the first broad point I want to make. Let us rethink rationalism and atheism and make fundamental goals to give equitable opportunity to the children born on this land and to eliminate avoidable suffering. Let's make them the fundamental goals and use all our knowledge and passion and effort to accomplish these two objectives. The second broad point, particularly for the young people here, the children. You live in a fantastic age. We all live in a fantastic age. Things unavailable to emperors and kings and dictators 50 or 100 years ago are available to most of us most of the time. It's amazing. We lament about what is wrong, but we forget how wonderfully the world is changing for the better. I know when we see many things that are wrong in this world, the violence, the abuse of human rights, the tyranny you witness, and acts of terror, you think the world is a terrible place. It's not. Never in human history has the world been better than today. It doesn't mean our world is perfect. It means our world is getting better and better and better every day. Never was the world less violent than today in human history. We have a nostalgic view of the past, that the bygone eras were spectacular, they were wonderful, they were golden ages. There were, of course, some great things because we are all there standing on the foundations laid by our ancestors, but human society constantly improved things in the past 70,000 years, in particular in the past 10 to 12,000 years, and in particular in the past 500 years, and very especially in the past 150 to 200 years. There's been spectacular progress. Violence is coming down, the quality of life is going up, lifespans are expanding, disease burden is coming down, our knowledge is exploding, the comforts of life are increasing, our freedom itself is expanding in general. The world is getting better, not worse. I want all of us to understand because far too many people are pessimistic. They're looking at what is wrong, forgetting how much we accomplished. Even in the past 30, 40 years, let's say not even my childhood, 30 years ago, 35, 36 years ago, I was district magistrate in one of the districts that our friend mentioned, another district later. Compared to that, today, every village has electricity practically round the clock. It was unthinkable even 15, 20 years ago that you'd have electricity, a function like this goes on, and there would have been 20 interruptions in 1 hour because of power outage. Without a generator, you could not have a conference like this, impossible. You could not go to a movie theater to watch a film without a generator. Just imagine how far we've come. Telephone was an unbelievable luxury when I first came to college. For the first time I saw a telephone instrument in Loyola College. I did not know how to use it. Of course, there was nobody to talk to for me because there's nobody whom I would talk to who had a telephone. Even if somebody had it, I didn't know how to use a telephone. I also had a telephone in the medical college hostel in Guntur. Again, I never used it because telephone was an unapproachable instrument. 1 in 100 people got a telephone in those days. Today, there's not a person in India who doesn't have a telephone, 1 billion plus telephones. When I go to KBR Park every morning for a walk at 5:45 or 6 o'clock, I'm fascinated. Somebody buys one single banana, it costs 5 rupees or whatever, and he makes a payment through UPI on telephone instantly. It's actually happening in front of our eyes every day. Television was unthinkable. I remember as an official in the government, I was in Narsipatnam, Visakhapatnam district. There was an Asiad final going on, 1982. India, Pakistan were the finalists in hockey. So we all wanted to watch. All my colleagues from Vizag came to Narsipatnam. We all had a lunch there at my place, and then we went together to Kakinada, where Dr. Samaram graduated. Why Kakinada? Outside of Hyderabad, Kakinada was the only town with a television in those days. Why? Because the local MP was the Minister of Electronics. So he had power over the television. Therefore, in his own constituency, he installed a TV station. So we all went to the Kakinada collector's home to watch that match. By the time we reached there, India lost 7-0 in that final, unfortunately. That's a different story. But television was unapproachable. Today, there's not a home in India which doesn't have a television. Probably this is the only country where there are more television sets than toilets, at least until recently. Every room there's a TV. And then digital technology. When NTR started a mission to improve the quality of school education, he hired two of our greatest artists, the Telugu land, the great Bapu, the film director, and I don't know if you call him a painter or a Chitrakaru Nevantaramari, and Mullapudi Venkatramana. Mullapudi told me the story of how they produced those videos for school education. They produced brilliant content, but there were no means of communication. There was no power, therefore TV did not work even if you gave them a cassette. There was no digital technology, it was unheard of. The word email came only much later. But today, with the flick of a button, even before this meeting I was just researching some things. With the flick of a button, you now know everything in the world, digital technology. So spectacular advances are taking place. Even a country like India is leapfrogging dramatically. And the world is getting better and better and better. So give up the cynicism and despair and pessimism. It does not mean things are wonderful. It does not mean things are all good. It means that we can make them better. There is not a challenge in the world today we cannot confront with the existing knowledge and resources, including global warming, from local to global problems. But the challenge is, how do you make that accessible to everybody? And how do you combine the best of our tradition with the best of modernity? I was delighted to see the respect for tradition here in this Nastik Kendra. I saw a portrait of Charaka and Shushika. I saw a tribute paid to the sensible elements of yoga. Because we are not disconnected from the past. We are built on our foundations. It is the superstition we are opposed to. It is the hatred and bigotry that we are opposed to. We recognize that we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. The unique feature of human society is that we alone have the ability to A, learn from others and transfer our learning to our peers and the next generation. No other animal has that privilege. And we have the gift of speech. Sometime around 75,000 years ago, a spectacular thing happened. While other features were there already as part of evolution, we developed the gift of language. That changed everything. Gift of speech. For the first time in the planetary history, we could learn from others' experience, not your own personal experience, and you could transfer that knowledge to the next generations. Therefore, each generation learns everything that the earlier generations accumulated, and if they add a little bit more, that generation is better off. And generationally, we change spectacularly. We are nothing but the cumulative sum total of all the learnings, the best of humanity, in about 70 to 80,000 years. And if we simply learn the best things from the past and understand our own history, the journey of humanity, journey in life and journey physically in terms of migration. If we understand human migration, I think much of our stupidity about race, about religion, about all bigotry will disappear. Now we know for sure that all of us, wherever we live on planet Earth, we all arose from a small number of women, probably in the Rift Valley of Kenya, in East Africa. Some people say maybe Southern Africa. That's a matter of some debate even today, but there's no doubt about the broad origin of where we are from. No matter where you are, you may be white, you may be black, you may be brown, you may be yellow, doesn't matter who you are, where you are. We all came from those probably 6 or 7 women. There were several strands of migration. Some went to the north to Europe, some went to the east, where the coast, and that's how people migrated to Indian subcontinent, first to the west coast, and where the coast to the east coast, from here to Southeast Asia and up to Australia, wherever the eye can take you, because there was no navigational facility at that time. Another group went to Central Asia, China, some went to Siberia. Some of you may be surprised, young people in particular. Do you know how human beings first went to American continent? Anybody? Young people here? How did the first human beings go to America? Even today, Bering Strait is only 70 feet deep, inhospitable, terribly cold, full of winds, but in the Ice Age, the sea level was about 300 feet below the current level. It was a land bridge. Like for instance, between India and Sri Lanka, in the Pak Strait as we call it, there's actually a land bridge which is only about 20-30 feet deep. In some parts only 10-15 feet deep, whereas the sea was about 200 feet below the current level. So they were connected. People, some 12,000 years ago, they simply walked across the Bering Strait via Siberia at the height of the Ice Age. A small number. They went to Alaska. It took 3,000 years for them to cross the Alaskan Ridge after going to Alaska. Once they crossed the Alaskan Ridge, in about 1,000 years, from the north of Canada to the southern tip of South America, 8,000 miles, they colonized in just 1,000 years. We are all one. Chinese argued until recently that they were a different species. Every country, every civilization believed that we were specially anointed by God. Chinese too believed that. But genetic studies have proven beyond any doubt that we all have one origin. We are genetically related, incredibly related. If our kids understand this one simple thing of human migration, much of our idiocy about caste, about region, about religion, about skin color, and about many other things will vanish. We don't know how to argue much. True education is missing. So this is the message that I think we have to pass on to the next generation. You live in a fantastic world, a world of immense possibilities, greater than ever before in human history. What an Akbar or an Ashoka could not even dream of, you and I enjoy today. This electricity and lighting, this public address system. In the times of Lincoln, they had to bellow. They used to be gathering here. Whoever had the greatest lung power, like your finance minister of Andhra Pradesh, Payyavala Keshav, he had that lung power. He didn't require a microphone. So people who had the lung power became leaders. And 5-6 hours debates used to go on when Lincoln was in active politics. And today, even his feeble voice, feeble people without the lung power can reach millions. The world has changed beyond recognition, and it's changing for the better every day. While you confront the problems and challenges, look at the opportunities. There is not a cloud dark enough which does not have a silver lining. There is not a problem big enough which does not have a practical, effective, simple solution, including global warming. And finally, and this is the last point I would like to say, Dr. Samaram asked me a question. How come people don't listen to us? He mentioned his own life and all of us, what we are working. He mentioned me and my work and mentioned others. I don't think people don't listen to us. I think the problem is something slightly different. Human beings, and here is I'm going to be a little sharp about humanity. We exaggerate human beings' capacity to change in the short term. Throughout history, in every culture, in every society, there were always a few pioneers who saw far ahead. Much of the society was deaf to their entreaties, their philosophy, or their thinking, or their logic, or their evidence. From Galileo to Copernicus to prove, you name it, anywhere in the world. Human society did not embrace the right thing, the sensible thing, the pragmatic thing, the evidence-based thing, the logical thing instantly. But a few people, they had the ability to see farther, and then they moved the needle. But over time, generationally, by cumulative impact of the experience, once they understood the value of what is being taught, not through logic, but through experience, humanity embraced it. Let me tell you one story, a real story, and conclude. In 1819, a baby was born in the then Hungary, in Austro-Hungarian Empire. That baby was named Ignaz Semmelweis. Ignaz Semmelweis rose to be a physician in Europe. In those days, Vienna was the seat of the empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and even today Vienna is an incredibly important cultural center in Europe. In those days, it was the center. So Semmelweis went there to practice medicine. In those days, 25 to 30% of women, 25 to 30% of women, pregnant women, used to die after childbirth. Imagine 1/4 of women dying after childbirth. If there were 100 childbirths, about 25 died. The mothers died. They did not know why. The mothers got fever. They called it puerperal fever. Balinta Choravanewad. They did not know why. They had no clue because the word infection was not invented. Bacteria were not discovered. We had no understanding of disease. As late as 1840s, we did not know. We had no clue. Semmelweis, he was monitoring two different hospitals. In one hospital, the doctors were attending on the patients and the pregnant mothers, assisting in child delivery. Another, the nurses were assisting. Where the nurses were taking care of the pregnant women, the mortality was very low. Very few people, mothers died. Where the doctors were attending, mortality was very high. He started thinking. Remember, the word infection was not known. That was much later. What we call empiricism. By empiricism, he discovered the nurses were washing their hands properly before going to every woman in labor to assist her. Whereas the doctors, they were doing dissections of the dead bodies. They were teaching medical students. With the same hands, they went and assisted the women in labor. And with the same hands, they went to the next patient, assisted them. And there was very high mortality. Semmelweis came to the conclusion, he did not know why, but he came to the conclusion that it's all about washing your hands. It's called empiricism, as I said. You don't know the causality. You don't know the logical reason. But observation told you that this works, that doesn't. And he was passionate. He tried to educate not the people of Europe, the doctors of Europe, whose job it was to save human lives. By definition, a doctor's job is to save, right? A doctor, by definition, is a scientist. So he told the scientists, whose job it was to save human lives, please wash your hands. I do not know why, but if you wash your hands, many more women live. If you don't wash your hands, women are dying in large numbers after childbirth. If human beings really are as smart as we think they are, what should the doctors be doing when their job is to save lives? This man is shouting from rooftops, let us try. Is it true? Let us try. Not one doctor did that. Remember, by 1840s, Industrial Revolution was in progress. The British Industrial Revolution, historians say, was between 1760 and 1840. Technology was part of life. Industrialization was already taking place in a big way. Manufacturing was coming into vogue. Science was the dominant thing. Reason, science, enlightenment, Renaissance. And yet, the doctors of Europe laughed him off. They branded him insane. And he was institutionalized as a madman. For wanting to save lives, for wanting to communicate what he observed scientifically, he was branded as a madman. Semmelweis was put in a mental asylum. Now, for those who are of my age and older, you would remember in our childhood when somebody was branded pichekindi ante em chesevallu aa rojullo. Even 50, 60 years ago, pichekindi ante నాకు బాగా గుర్తుంది, వేప మండలతో కొట్టేవాళ్ళు, జైల్లో పడేసేవాళ్ళు. They used to torture them. And 1850s, he was institutionalized. What was the treatment given to him? He was beaten black and blue. Finally, 1865, at the age of 46, Semmelweis died of the injuries he sustained because he got infection, sepsis. He died of sepsis for the sin of telling the fellow doctors how to save pregnant women after childbirth. That's the bad news. But what's the good news? Why should we therefore believe that humanity can do better? Of course, an individual, a great human being, who was passionate, who was humanist, who was scientifically accurate, he had to pay the price with his life. But look at the big picture. A generation later, within 20 years, 3 great men came, influenced by Semmelweis's life and work. Some of the names are familiar to some people here, some may not be. One was Robert Koch. Men of science, men and women of science and medicine, they would know Koch. Robert Koch was the man who discovered tubercle bacilli. Koch was the man who came up with what are called Koch's postulates. If we say the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-19, that virus caused COVID disease, you don't say it casually. There are certain standards of proof. To say that something caused this disease, there is a standard of proof. There are 4 postulates. Even today, the modified Koch's postulates are the gold standard in determining the causality of disease. So Robert Koch. The second name is familiar to many people, a name called Louis Pasteur. Remember Pasteur? Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur was the man who came up with pasteurization, the germ theory of disease, and so on and so forth. So Pasteur. The third man called Joseph Lister. Some of you might have heard of Listerine mouthwash. It came from Lister's name. Lister is famous for sanitization, for sterilization, for hand washing, so on and so forth. These 3 were contemporaries. They came 20 years later. They were influenced by Ignaz Semmelweis. Well, Semmelweis could not understand the causality, it was only empiricism. By this time, the germ theory, they understood the bacteria, they understood much better the causality of disease, and they understood how to prevent that, and therefore the world changed. When in 1865, Semmelweis had to pay the price with his life, by 1880s and 90s, the world changed. Millions of women's lives were saved. Many more millions of other lives were saved because we understood infection, we understood sterilization, we understood cleanliness. This is the answer to Dr. Samram's question. In the short term, sometimes things appear gloomy. In the long term, we are smart enough collectively as humanity to understand what is in our self-interest, not what is logical, what is in our self-interest. Once you experience it, or learn through experience over a lifetime, over a generation, then things dramatically change. And that's why in the short term things are always a little gloomy. In the long term they're always optimistic. And that's what should really propel us. We are also grateful to this wonderful institution, to this wonderful family, to these intrepid, rational, public-spirited, humane individuals and leaders who influenced thousands, transformed the lives of millions, who are keeping the torch of rationalism and humanism alive. I cannot emphasize this enough because I'm one of those touched by the work done by this institution. Thank you for the work you have done, Samaram Garu, and your late father, the great Gopala Ramchandra Garu, and all of you, and many, many others across the Telugu land, across the southern states of India, and across the country at large. Thank you for this wonderful work. Thank you for the cheerfulness with which you are transmitting this wisdom. You are persevering. When you look at the faces of the joy, the optimism, it's such a wonderful thing. And it shows in their health, healthy, vigorous, transcending the age. Once again, I thank you all for your attention. I spoke much longer than I wanted to. Forgive me for that. We'll have a meaningful interaction. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.